at Rocket Joy. Give it up for Joy.
Favorite things, space, fusion, and lesbians. So to get started, a little bit about me. So I've been a space nerd my entire life. Grew up building model rockets and Legos, and yes, went to space camp more than once. And when I was 7 years old, I got this signed photo from Sally Ride, and it says, "To Joy, reach for the stars." And that's been a motto of mine ever since I was a little kid. I took that motivation with me to MIT, where I majored in aerospace engineering. While I was in college, or actually just after, Sally Ride passed away. And the last line in her obituary said, "Sally Ride is survived by her partner, Tam O'Shaughnessy." I furiously Googled Tam's name, realized that Tam was a woman. I was like, holy cow, my childhood hero is actually also queer. And then from that day forward, it's been a really big point of mine to be visibly out and who I am in my industry, in my field, because you never know who else you're going to inspire. If I had known that Sally was queer when I was a kid, it would have been a little bit easier for me. All right, so after MIT, I went to SpaceX. So I started there as an intern in the summer of 2008. And then at the end of that summer, I got a full-time offer. That offer came a month after SpaceX's third launch failure in a row, and I still signed that offer not knowing if there was a company to come back to after my last year in school. And why? Because I was super enthralled with the technology, I loved the team, and this really was my dream job that I've wanted since I was a kid. Thankfully, the fourth flight was a success, so I had a company to come back to, and I started full-time in March of 2009. My first job at SpaceX was the development engineer for the Draco thrusters, which you can see on the bottom here. And then actually in that top picture, you can see the engines firing in space. To be a 24-year-old seeing hardware that you've built flying in space was by far the coolest feeling that I've ever had. Over my 10 years at SpaceX, I went from a development engineer and switched over to the manufacturing side, where I grew from a manufacturing engineer to a lead, a manager, and then a senior manager of our Dragon manufacturing engineering team. And my unofficial role was Mother of Dragons. So what did I learn from 10 whole years at SpaceX? The big thing that I learned was that even though the company was actually founded to make life multiplanetary and to send people to Mars, that's not actually where the company started. So the company started at a very small scale. So you can see on the far left, the Falcon 1 rocket. So that's the one that was flying when I was an intern. That way, the company was able to operate and to iterate very quickly at a much lower cost and a much faster pace. So if you're starting a company, you may have grand ambitions, a grand mission, but it does take a little bit of a step-by-step approach to get there. In the 10 years that I was at SpaceX, I watched the launch vehicles evolve from the Falcon 1 to the Falcon 9, a little bit of a bigger rocket. And then from there, upgrading the rocket for a larger vehicle, more mass, more thrust, more mass to orbit, and then more thrust. And now, SpaceX is working on that Mars vehicle 17 years after their founding. So another one of SpaceX's secrets for success is also innovation. So in order to actually produce a good product, you want to do not just 10% better than your current product, you actually want to go 10x that. How can you actually upsize the market and produce a much better product that is not just a slightly better variation of what exists? So when SpaceX decided that they wanted to actually land rockets back from space, people thought we were crazy. They're like, that has never been done before. There's no historical precedent. Why in the hell are you guys going to do that? So we said, well, the laws of physics say it's possible, so we're going to give it a shot. So it started out with small hop tests at our test facility in Texas, and then went to full-scale testing for rockets coming back from space. And now, just a little over 4 years since SpaceX landed its first rocket, they have successfully recovered over 40 rockets, and 26 of them have actually reflown. So think of that as millions and millions of dollars that are saved and getting us towards a much cheaper access to space. SpaceX is currently doing that as well with its Mars vehicle. So that picture on the right is actually what they call Starhopper. So that's a test prototype for the Mars vehicle. And that did a 500-foot hop just 2 weeks ago from their facility in Texas. And then the next step will be to innovate from there to increase the scale and then eventually be sending people to Mars within the decade. So, if I landed my dream job out of college, I am a self-admitted space nerd. Why did I leave aerospace? For me, this picture was a very key part of this. I looked around and said, our planet is in trouble. Global warming is a massive issue that we have to face. It's one thing to try and get to Mars and turn it into a habitable planet, and that picture on the left is actually Mars, not Earth. So this is a concept for terraforming Mars well past our lifetime. So the picture on the right is what our Earth could be within a couple of decades. So global warming, carbon emissions is really affecting our planet, and that was something that I wanted to go and fix immediately. And hopefully, my next job after this will be putting fusion power plants on Mars. So, all right, so you're probably wondering what the heck is fusion. So I hope to do my best to explain this in the 6 minutes I have left. So fusion, if you typically think of energy, the first thing that pops in your mind is, or in terms of nuclear energy, is fission. So fission is the splitting of atoms, which leads to a chain reaction, and could also lead to catastrophic results like Chernobyl or Fukushima. Fusion is actually the exact opposite of that. It's actually fusing two very, very light atoms together, two different isotopes of hydrogen, and then when those combine, they produce helium and then a ton of energy. That energy is put out in the form of heat, which we can run through a steam generator and then capture that to go directly into a power plant as electricity. Easy, right? So why is this important? As our world grows, as our technology grows, the amount of energy that we consume as a species continues to grow and grow. We are currently not able to match the pace of electricity demands and energy demands in the world, and that is, we're projected to increase that need dramatically even over the next decade. And right now, if you wanted to switch away from complete fossil fuel production, wind and solar are not enough to actually capture the amount of energy demand there is in the world. So that's where fusion comes in. The idea is to produce fusion power plants that are around the world that are providing zero emissions energy and connecting directly into your current electric grid. So where are we at today with fusion? So fusion as a science has actually been around for about 5 decades, and it started out in government labs and university labs, and actually the goal for fusion is to actually get to what we call break even. So that is your energy out exceeds the energy that you put in. So as of today, all fusion experiments have consumed more energy than they produced. So the goal is to actually reach that break even point and turn this into a net energy device. So from 1970s to the 1990s, the acceleration of technology in fusion actually exceeded Moore's law up until the late 90s. When it hit the 90s, it plateaued, and there were 2 courses of action on how do you actually achieve net energy. The first is to scale up to a massive fusion device, which you can see on the left, which is a reactor that's being built in France called ITER. And then the second course of action is to go for a new material. So that is what my company, Commonwealth Fusion Systems, is doing. We're building what we call Spark. So that is our fusion device, which will achieve net positive power fusion by 2025. And you can see for a sense of scale on that picture in the left, that's actually a person circled in red, and then compared to the size of the device that we're building now. So with a much smaller device, we can accelerate much more quickly, just like SpaceX did with the Falcon 1 rocket, and we can get to market quicker and do so with a lot less money as well. So our goal at CFS is to provide fusion power to the world in time to make a difference. If you read any of the studies that are going into global warming and emissions right now, we're on a trajectory to an unsustainable environment. So we want to make sure that we're getting there in time to make a difference with that small scale fusion device at first. So right now, as the head of manufacturing at CFS, I'm responsible for building that first demo magnet. So that's our goal for the next 1.5 years. And this will prove out the core technology and retire a very major risk early in the process. From there, with our team and our partnership with MIT, building the Spark device, that one in the middle, is more of the easy part. So the goal for that is to have produced net energy by 2025. And then from there, we'll scale up to ARC, which, yes, is named after the arc reactor in Iron Man. And the goal for that is to actually have fusion power on the grid by 2033. So you could have fusion power in your house in less than 15 years. All right, and a last note as well, it's one thing to work on technologies that are changing the world. It's also another to be working at companies that are also changing the world and focusing on the human element. When I was at SpaceX, I co-founded both the Women's Network and the Out and Allied LGBT employee resource groups, and this actually happened only 3.5 years ago. So for a company, this was a major changing point to show that we cared about the employees, that we wanted to build a community, because not only is it important to be doing world-changing things, but it's also important to make sure that employees feel welcomed and that they have a great environment to be a part of. So we're doing the same thing at CFS. I was really thrilled to walk into my interview, rocking a mohawk, talking about starting a queer ERG, and just being able to be myself, and that was really valued. So for me, that was a big, one of my actually important reasons for coming to this company was that I was able to be myself and to be valued. So thank you, and go change the world.
He's all, wow.